This is The Gorge. It's a podcast where my friend Sara and I gorge ourselves on overanalyzing a topic. The Gorge is brought to you by Ko-fi. That's ko-fi.com/THEGORGE. And Sara, what are we talking about tonight?
Tonight we have something special. We actually have an interview with the artist and creator for Scoob and Shag. Do you want me to just call you Dingo? Is that cool?
Yeah, that's what most people call me.
Okay.
So yeah, this is Dingo. He writes and draws Scoob and Shag, which is a webcomic. Do you wanna kind of tell us what that webcomic is about for people at home?
Sure. I mean, that's a pretty big question.
Yeah, I know, right?
Well, I mean, first of all, thanks for having me, guys.
Oh, absolutely. Thanks for coming.
It's my first ever podcast, really.
Oh, awesome. Thank you.
Yes.
First of many, I hope.
Yeah.
First of many, absolutely.
So Scoob and Shag, it's a webcomic I started in 2014. It is basically, to sum it up, a parody of Scooby-Doo that kind of evolves to have a lot of elements of, like, I guess, horror, anime, specifically like shonen anime.
Mm-hmm.
And it gets a little crazy. Can't say too much without spoiling.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty good summary of it. It's like somebody asked me when I was talking about it to them, I was like, what would you say? I was like, it's like a surrealist action comic using Hanna-Barbera and WB characters, you know?
Yeah, a lot of people sum it up as JoJo, but with Looney Tunes.
I think that's pretty
So
accurate
awesome.
too.
That's pretty good. So yeah, we've got you here. We're gonna ask you some questions. We're gonna just kind of talk about the comic. This is exciting to have somebody on board who is just gonna, talk to us about this thing they made. Because usually we just sit around and talk about a thing somebody else made without any insight from the creator. So yeah. Go ahead.
And you don't have to worry about spoilers or anything. This podcast is already spoiler heavy.
Yeah.
Right.
So you don't have to like hide anything and worry about people not listening. Like, we generally assume if they're listening to this, it's because they're already fans of it.
Yeah, they probably are already caught up.
Mm-hmm. So I guess the first question I wanted to ask you is like, so early on in the comic, it was just a bunch of one-offs of Scoob and Shag doing a bunch of weird stuff. So like, when did you start realizing like, oh, I've kind of got a plot going here?
So this is a question I get a lot, and it definitely didn't, I obviously didn't start it off with like a plot in mind. I think around the time like when Mick shows up is really when I said, wouldn't it be like really funny? That's literally my train of thought. Like, wouldn't it be really funny if I just had this really like crazy long plot?
I think that's the start of many a good idea. Wouldn't it be funny if?
And so you were just like, yeah, let's just start a crazy long plot as like a joke, and then it kind of, I guess, spiraled out from there.
Yeah, because I mean, I've like dabbled in like comics for a while. Like I've done a couple of like really shonen-y like action kind of stuff, but like nothing serious, something that didn't last very long. So it's something I've always really wanted to like set my mind to really like sit down and write out like a whole like story. Mm-hmm. But I was already doing this comic. Those first couple episodes, they were just jokes. They picked up a little bit more than I expected to. They got a pretty like decent following on Tumblr. Mm-hmm. And I said, you know what? Why don't I just make this the comic I've always wanted to make? Like, I already have the audience. Why don't I just go completely off the rails with this?
Go ahead.
It's funny because like I remember you said it started in 2014. I remember like a long time ago seeing like every so often I'd see them across my dash on Tumblr. It's like, oh, look at this weird comic of Scooby-Doo vomiting mayo. And it's like, and then it's like, a few years ago, it's like, oh wow, this is like turning into a thing.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, dogs.
Sorry about that.
That's Scoob.
Don't apologize. That's Scoob.
That's Scoob, yeah. That's just the voice actor for Scoob. So yeah, 2014 is when I started it. I started it with two other friends. and like I said, it just started completely as a joke. And then it kind of died off after like, I don't know, maybe a year or two, because we didn't take it that serious. But then like one day I was like, hey, let me do a couple more episodes because we have all these people that are following us now. And so I started putting out new episodes, and that's when I kind of said, okay, let me come up with this idea for a plot because that would be really, really funny.
So, one of the things that I always think is really interesting about Scoob and Shag is that it starts out as kind of like a, I guess, surrealist horror story, and then kind of turns into a shonen horror story. I know you mentioned shonen when you were talking about it. So was that the plan, or was that one of those things where it's like, this story has taken a way different turn than I anticipated?
The shonen thing, I did have the idea to do that pretty early on. So when I did decide to like make it horror, I did also want to make it shonen anime, because those are just two things I just really love and like have consumed a lot of media of. So I thought it'd be really fun. But yeah, I mean, anime, I grew up with it. Horror, I guess, is kind of later in life. I got like a real like big love for, so I started watching like a lot of movies, and that's around the time where I kind of got the inspiration. So I mean, recently the last couple episodes don't have too much horror. It is something I kind of want to go back to, because I think at its core I want this to kind of be a horror story. But drawing anime fights is too much fun, so those are gonna still be in there.
What shonen are you reading right now? Just as like a curiosity, are you reading anything like current right now?
I'm not really reading anything.
Okay.
Well, I'm mostly reading books, so horror books is something else I've been really getting into. But as far as like manga or anything, I haven't. I think the last thing I was reading was My Hero Academia.
Okay.
But I haven't caught up with that in a while.
What horror books have you been reading then? That's always good. I want to hear. I like to hear what functions as influences for people who make things.
Yeah, I mean, I've been reading a lot of like smaller known authors. Mostly like recommendations I've seen like on Twitter and stuff like that.
Okay.
So, a really good one I just read was I'm Thinking of Ending Things is a really cool one.
Okay.
This one isn't horror, but I recently finished reading Dune.
Ooh.
Oh wow.
Yeah. That one. that was tough. I love it.
It's massive.
Yeah.
That's cool. That's cool. So who is that? The one you mentioned earlier that I'm Thinking of Ending Things. Who is that by?
The name of the author escapes my mind. I might have to look it up.
I'm always a sucker for like a really good title like that. Like it makes you think of like, I love stuff like John Dies at the End or This Book is Full of Spiders. So I'm Thinking of Ending Things. I'm like, ooh, I might check that out. I'll look that up.
Ian, I don't know how to pronounce that. Ian Reed is the name of the author. It's a really cool, it's really short, like kind of psychological thriller. Really, really enjoyed it. They're making a movie of it, I think, next year.
Oh, really?
Oh,
okay.
Cool.
Neat.
Cool.
So like, yeah, bringing it back around to Scoob and Shag, there's a lot of like, some of that early, like surrealist stuff is just like, I guess not to really gush, but like it is fantastic. Some of the horror imagery that you kind of conjure up is like really like strong. And I was just, I guess, wondering kind of like where some of that I guess came from. Like, are there any kind of specific influences you had in mind when you think of like that kind of horror stuff, or is it just stuff that's kind of culturally osmosed over the years? Because I mean, we're all on the internet. We've all kind of seen like this, like the horror stuff that's on the internet.
Oh yeah, and I think almost anyone that's on the internet that's like a fan of horror, or just a fan of horror in general, has probably seen like Junji Ito's work.
Yeah.
So Junji Ito is like a huge.
Yeah, I was okay. I was literally gonna ask because I could see it really strong. It's awesome.
Yeah. But yeah, it is a little bit of that in terms of like, I guess, style. But I don't know. I think it's really cool to like learn what is scary, if that makes sense. Like, I don't know. I just think it's really, really interesting to learn kind of how the brain works and how fear works in general, and how that can be kind of translated to like a visual thing, especially in comics. I think it's really hard. But yeah, I mean, most of the stuff just comes from my imagination.
Yeah.
I think ever since I started Scoob and Shag, I kind of go around my day and like find things and like kind of come up with these like hypotheticals, like, oh, wouldn't it be really scary if this and this, you know?
Just lay up at night and so find yourself in worst case scenarios.
That's exactly what I do, and because I've been writing this story, and I have to write it all down. Like, I literally have like a list on my phone of just like ideas for like horror stories. Yeah.
Do you ever just like psych yourself out, like thinking of like scary ideas, and you're like, oh no, why did I think of that?
It is true, and like I bother my friends with them all the time, and they're like, how do you think of this stuff?
No!
Stop it.
That's the best way to gauge it is drag your friends into it. Be like, hey, wouldn't it be scary? Like, what do you think? How is this scary or not? And they're like, yes. Don't show me that anymore.
Yeah, exactly.
Why would you send me that? That's awesome.
I mean, I always think of just like the first time I kind of knew, I realized like, oh wow, this is going to be something big. Is that shot of Mick, that first shot of him just in the shadows, and there's that creepy, realistic human eye underneath the helmet, and it's like, oh wow.
Yeah,
a lot of people didn't notice it at first, which I think is really funny.
I think that's kind of what makes it so scary, though, is going back and like looking at it again and be like, that's a people.
Yeah. you kind of take for granted, like, oh yeah, these are the cartoon characters, you know, and then it's, oh, this is a human man in a suit. It's like, oh, that's different.
So much worse.
Yeah, that I think is one of my favorite like drawings I've done, just in general.
Really?
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and the whole someone being behind the mask is something I had like from the start. So that was always really fun to mess around with.
Yeah, I think of that, and I also think of the drawing of faceless Shag turning around.
Yeah,
that was really good. So you mentioned like jotting down notes and stuff. Are you the kind of writer that just kind of writes and then kind of plans as they go, or do you have like hard set, I know what's going to happen a year from now?
It's a little of both. I definitely don't have like the whole thing written out. I haven't really thought of like an ending or a way to end the story yet, because I don't really plan to for a while.
Right.
But for the most part, I do have a lot written out ahead of time, but not so deep as like the dialogue or anything like that. Kind of just like a general idea of like where I want the story to go, like a timeline, what's going to happen. And then I'll plan out like specifically how a scene is laid out and how the dialogue goes, like when I actually sit down and like start sketching out an episode.
Okay.
All right. Cool.
You have a pretty consistent. You release things pretty consistently.
Yeah, I try to.
Yeah. What's the? I guess kind of like how long does the average? Because like ContraPoints on Twitter a few weeks ago was talking about how long it takes her to make a video. And I was just kind of wondering like how long from like start to finish does an episode take? I guess.
I'll say it takes at most like 2 or 3 days.
Okay.
Which is pretty much my whole weekends. I work a full-time job during the day, so that's like really the only time I have to work on episodes.
Right.
So if something comes up and I have to do something that weekend or I have to go somewhere, it kind of cuts into that time, and so that's why I don't always upload on time. But I always try to generally stick to once a week.
Yeah, I mean, I get it too, because I work a full-time like creative job as well. So like, you know, you don't, and really the idea that you can even come home and work on it in the weekend is like super impressive to me, man.
Yeah.
Like when I come home, the last thing I want to do is like creative stuff. So that's pretty impressive.
Yeah, definitely. I sometimes feel like I have no social life just because I'm working. It feels like I'm working 2 full-time jobs.
Just like a real mangaka, dude.
Right?
So yeah, but I mean, the community's been like growing so much, and especially with like stuff like Patreon, it's great for artists out there now to like make a living off of making art, which is really cool. So hopefully sometime soon, I think I might be able to like really sit down and do this full time, which is a really it's a really exciting idea.
I know you just hit 100,000 followers on Twitter, right?
On Webtoons. Yeah.
Okay. Because I saw the illustrations and stuff, and I wasn't sure. That's exciting though. That's really cool. Good for you.
Yeah, it's really cool. So once that comes, I can really feel like I can put 100% into everything. You know, I'd be able to update more than probably once a week.
Right.
So really looking forward to it.
Plug that Patreon right now.
Yeah. Patreon.com/Dingo the Dog. No space.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, we'll put that link in the description too.
Good. Yeah,
for sure. But yeah, that's so cool. And yeah, the community I know it's just been like exploding lately. Who was it that put out that video that's like, you got to start reading Scoob and Shag?
Oh yeah, Blue Shades.
Yeah.
He did that like video essay about it, which was really cool because it makes me sound like more of a genius than I actually am. But yeah, I've watched it like 3 times now whenever I need like an ego boost. But yeah, it was really cool, and it kind of blew up on YouTube, and I've been getting like consistently like new followers every day because of it.
Oh wow.
Mm-hmm. I mean, and in the Discord I'm just seeing like every hour or so it's like, ding, someone new joined, and it's so cool. It's so cool. And like on Twitter, a group of people that I follow, like someone said like, start reading this comic, and then all of them were talking about it for like a week straight, just tweeting constantly about it. And it's just like, it's so cool to see a project like this grow.
Yeah, do you guys know Super Eye Patch Wolf?
Yes, absolutely.
I love that guy's videos, and his like really popular video about horror is like one of the things that like inspired me so much.
Mm-hmm.
He recently put out an episode of his podcast and mentioned my comic.
No way.
Way. That's so cool.
That's so exciting. Yeah, because he I know he does the seasonal this is what I'm like really liking right now. So, you know, that would be amazing to actually see it get in there, right?
Yeah. So that's really cool. You know, to have someone you admire to like acknowledge you is like, what? No way.
Yeah, it's a little it's bizarre. Is it weird to be on the receiving end of, you know, people always joke about like death of the author, you know, to have somebody like make a video that's talking about like themes and like what's going on in your comic and stuff like that. You know, that whole idea of somebody reading into something that maybe you didn't necessarily intend, but to actually have somebody produce like a critical reading of your work, that has to be bizarre, right?
Oh, absolutely. It's something, you know, I've never experienced before. So I think for me it helps a lot to kind of keep a distance from it.
Right.
I know on the Discord there's a whole channel dedicated to like analyzing and like coming up with ideas and stuff like that. I try not to like look at it that much because I don't want it to like, I guess, influence my creative process.
Right.
So I have to like take everything with a grain of salt, so that I can tunnel vision basically my idea and not let like all these influence like really change my initial goal.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So like speaking of that, like of your creative process, are there any sort of like rules or things that you've created to like when you're writing character dialogue or personalities that you try to keep in mind, like about your lore or the story or how they interact with each other?
Sure. I haven't gotten too much of a chance to do it just yet, I feel like. The lore of Scoob and Shag, I feel like a lot of it, I'm trying to show more of it now in these like flashback episodes, like the forgot what it's called, and I wrote it. The Coward King.
Yeah.
Is where I'm trying to give a little bit more backstory to kind of set the universe in stone, and where the story's going now. I want to dive into more like character development and like world building to really kind of establish the groundwork. Because I think starting off from, obviously like a joke comic that didn't have really anything set in stone in the beginning, to now what it's basically grown into, I have to like sit down and be like, okay, what are the rules? How does this world work? How do these characters, know each other in the past? How do they know each other now? So that is something I've been like trying to tackle right now. So
Please.
that,
Please look forward to the Scoob and Shag lore Bible.
that's basically what I'm trying to do. So with this whole flashback, I'm hoping to get back to that scene where Scoob is fighting Mick and Shag is fighting Shag, to kind of close out this, I guess, chapter of the story, and then I'm going to kind of move into something a little different, which I think people are going to like because it's going to give them a lot of that world building kind of stuff, which I think is cool because then it gives people the room to play around and come up with their own ideas, come up with like their own ballyhoos and characters.
Yeah, I've been seeing people's ballyhoos and stuff on Twitter. That's so neat. Even to like me, I'm not even really like, obviously I'm not the creator, but just to even think like, oh, that's cool. This is like fan art and fan characters and stuff.
Yeah.
That's insane.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really cool feeling. And it's also weird because they're fan characters, but they're also like characters that already exist because using like cartoon characters that are already established, which is weird.
It's like here's my OC Calvin and Hobbes, but
yeah,
the Scoob and Shag version of them.
So that's why I feel like it's really weird, and I want to kind of give people the tools to come up with that kind of stuff. So that's why I feel like it's really important to kind of establish the universe of Scoob and Shag before kind of going forward.
Right.
Yeah, that's cool. Like you kind of started as it started becoming a plot. Now it's like, oh, I gotta establish how things work now.
Exactly.
So like it makes sense from where it started, kind of thing.
Yeah. So not only can now I write stories in that world, but other people can too.
Yeah.
That's really cool. Yeah, I've actually have seen people post fanfics of Scoob and Shag.
Please.
Oh, no.
You have to send me that.
Oh no.
Like, not to put any more pressure on you or anything.
That's dangerous. Do not go to the AO3 tag. I don't even know what the AO3 tag looks like, but I just feel like you probably shouldn't if it exists.
I've seen it, but it's just that weird surrealism of like, well, these are a fan interpretation of a fan interpretation of established characters.
Yeah, it's really weird. I don't know how else to describe it.
Is Horror Mickey like a way to keep Disney from like sending their hit squad to you?
In a way, it's something I've thought about. It's because it's definitely a possibility that one day Disney or Hanna-Barbera come knocking at my door and are like, "You're under arrest."
You're going to our secret Disney jail underneath the magical kingdom.
Yeah.
You can't show Mickey Mouse making someone implode on themselves. We'll get the real Mickey to do that to you.
But hopefully I can get away with it because it's like, parody law.
All right, we're fine.
And so is that the reason why no one really refers to each other by their full name, like why it is Scoob and Shag, so you can kind of like dance around that a little bit?
Yeah, 100%. That's the main reason I did that. Mostly so that it's not like, infringing on any copyrights, but also to kind of make those characters their own character.
Yeah.
So like it's not Scooby-Doo, it's Scoob. Like
right.
It's almost like a different universe where this character is known as Scoob and not Scooby-Doo.
Mm-hmm.
An alternate timeline where the show is called Scoob, Where Are You?
Yeah.
Scoob, where are you?
Shut up.
Brought to you by Bubsy.
Actually, now since to ask like a specific question about the lore, speaking of like the actual cartoon. So like I've just kind of been wondering personally, like I wanted to like figure this out, like so the way it works in the comic is that all these characters, like the cartoons we watched, are like broadcasts that were sent from Toon to Earth. So can we think of them as like they're actors, or is this recordings of like their actual adventures?
They're acting, for I think, to a degree. I think what they record and then send to Earth is kind of like something based probably like on their lives or their experiences, but it is 100% like a show that they produce like on a stage and then ship off to Earth. But
so like a dramatic reenactment of their lives, basically.
Yeah, so that's why like some of the personality is still there for some of the characters, but in a lot of other ways they're putting on. That's really fun to play around with because I can completely make a character act differently than how they do on their show. Or in some cases, like SpongeBob, for example, his whole thing is that he does act exactly like he does on his show, but everyone else looks around and looks at him and they're like, "What are you talking about? Like, are you okay?"
It's funny. It's just I always laugh at seeing Pat go through his whole time travel monologue, and it's like trying to read that in Patrick's voice from the cartoon. It's just like. That's great. I love that kind of stuff. Yeah. So, do you how much do you like? I don't know how to word this specifically, but like, what do you think the difference is between like the story that you have now with these established characters versus like if you took the same idea and made them kind of like just like copyright versions of them, like if it wasn't Scoob and Shag, if it was a guy that kind of looked like Shaggy and kind of resembled Scooby-Doo.
Yeah, I think if I had the idea before I started the whole comic, I would have gone that route. I would have made them just kind of vaguely resemble the characters. And I would have, changed the story a lot, because a lot of the times it feels like I'm just trying to like put a bunch of puzzle pieces together and trying to figure out how they go together. Whereas if I had all that time, I could have had an idea from the beginning. But yeah, I definitely think I would have done something to make them less like their cartoon characters, just to not get sued, I guess.
Right.
I think it's fine. It mostly falls into derivative works.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's part of the charm.
Absolutely. That is part of the, I guess the appeal. Maybe not so much the appeal, but definitely the thing that can draw people in is this idea of like, hey, this is a shonen battle comic with horror elements using Scooby-Doo and Shaggy, and like that in and of itself is part of the draw.
Yeah, I think the reason that they are so like iconic is like very jarring for people, and part of the reason why they like jump into it. Yeah. Because a lot of people, like, their first exposure will be like, an episode they saw on Tumblr, and they're like, what is this? Why is Shaggy fighting Yogi Bear?
Yeah, right, yeah.
Well, so if I would have done something different, maybe I wouldn't have gotten that reaction.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a huge part of the reaction, is that like dissonance. So I think, really it is kind of, there is that, like you said, the fear of some kind of like repercussion, but that is definitely the draw and part of the charm of it, I guess. So, you know, I think I think that it is kind of perfect the way it is.
Yeah.
You have it's a different kind of like of limitations versus like creative freedom, either one way or the other. Like if they were original characters, you'd have more freedom to branch out in one way, but because they're like these established characters, you can have a lot more fun with changing their personalities and just the general idea of like, oh, look at Shaggy from Scooby-Doo when he's uppercutting Yogi Bear in a training simulation. What is going on here?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, part of it I feel like is because it's you know, they're so iconic. It's also like if anything else and they weren't recognized by people, maybe it wouldn't have gotten it did. So yeah.
So I guess the other question is how long. I know you said you don't have like an ending planned, but do you have like a general idea of how long you want it to run, or is it just kind of until you run out of ideas kind of concept?
Yeah, I think I kind of want it to come to its end naturally.
Right.
I definitely don't want to run it to the ground.
Yeah.
You know, I want to end it right when it feels right to end it. But and then there's also the possibility that I do get sued. So I have always said that like if that does happen, I kind of need like a backup to kind of prepare myself for that, because it's always a possibility.
Right. If you do get sued, it's just you just put like an eye patch on Kermit and be like, no,
it's Hermit.
It's wearing a top hat. It's fine.
Yeah. So that's kind of one of the reasons why I've been doing all this work to kind of establish like the universe, so that even if, you know, this story does get a cease and desist and gets shut down, I can maybe still tell a story in that world without using all these characters, maybe using like original characters or like more less obvious versions of those characters.
So as this comic has gone on, like the character designs and the art you've definitely improved it and kind of solidified from where it began. I'm wondering, like, is it kind of hard to like get these characters from like wildly different art styles in their original forms to kind of like fit together? Like when you're drawing Popeye alongside Dee Dee from Dexter's Lab, like is that like that's like two completely different body types? Like, is there like a inherent challenge in drawing that?
Definitely. It happens a lot to me with drawing Swiper, because his characters, I feel like you usually only see him from like one angle, and Scooby-Doo too. Also, I feel like you kind of mostly see him facing one kind of direction. You don't really get like a 3D model of like Scoob's head on the TV shows. Maybe like in the games or something, but
yeah.
So it's hard to like do those really cool like, dynamic angles that you would see in a lot of like manga and stuff with those characters. So I kind of have to make them my own, I guess, and like usually before I draw, I'll kind of sit down and sketch a little bit, just to get the proportions right, so it look like the character, but enough my own style that I can like move them around and put them in different angles that you don't usually see them in.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I see that also a lot with like Kermit, because you never see Kermit's legs ever either.
Right, or his hand really only has like his mouth really only has like two positions you see it in, like it's up and down.
Right.
So to give him a mouth that like can move
and emote,
right, is different, but he still has to be recognizable as Kermit.
Right. So, speaking of him, like, are we going to see any more puppets? Because, like, he's the only one who's not a cartoon. Do you have any plans to, like, introduce the rest of the Muppets, or, like, any other, like, live-action type character?
I think so. I think I consider, like, the like Muppets and like any kind of puppets like that to be within the universe
Mhm.
of Scoob and Shag. But that I feel like I probably wouldn't have done that if I had planned it out earlier on.
Right.
Because I just introduced Kermit because it would be funny, and it's Kermit.
It's Kermit asking for weed.
Yeah, exactly. Wasn't until way later when I had like decided, okay, this is a universe that's all cartoon, that Kermit. So I think I would say that like Muppets and stuff do exist in this universe. And obviously I've referenced other things like the picture of Goku. Obviously I haven't shown like any anime characters or anything like that, and I said I probably won't have any like anime characters show up at any point,
Right.
just because I feel like it would kind of defeat the purpose if like anime characters showed up in like an anime parody.
Yeah.
Right. It would be kind of weird to see Goku with like a ballyhoo, because like Goku already has this incredible power in the series, and it's
Exactly.
like, wait.
So I probably won't ever introduce them. That doesn't mean that they wouldn't like exist in this world. Because obviously, if they're like an animated cartoon, they exist. So I've been trying to like, I've planned a couple ideas of how to kind of get around that. So basically, the way I see it is, it's like not just cartoons, but any kind of media, really. But the ones are specific to kind of tune.
Okay, because like we've also seen like Mario show up for a little bit too, and it's like but you can kind of get around that and say, oh, that's the cartoon version of Mario.
Exactly.
I guess you could say this Kermit is Muppet Babies Kermit. He's just grown up.
Yeah.
Grown up
that's
Muppet
true.
Babies. Kermit.
Adult baby Kermit.
Yeah.
That's the official name on the wiki now.
I mean, I think it worked out because personally Kermit's my favorite character so far.
Yeah.
But I think that's I just always like, oh yeah, he's the only one who's not explicitly drawn on paper.
Right. Yeah.
So let's see, what do I guess here. So you said you started these off as kind of like just jokes with your friends. Did you like have any like special like attachment or like grow up with these characters, or like that's kind of changed since you started drawing the comic, or like have they always been like you've always just been kind of like, oh, they're cartoon characters, or is like there's anyone specifically you're like, oh yeah, this is my favorite character growing up, like he's I've always liked this show or whatever?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I think every character I've introduced so far, I've introduced them because like they are characters that I grew up with. So I mean, obviously when I started with my friends, we didn't have this whole idea, and it's just me working on it now. So I first introduced Kermit because I grew up with the Muppets. Everyone knows who Kermit is. There's like a million memes about him, so I thought it'd be really funny. And then pretty much every character I've shown are characters I knew. So I get a lot of people asking, when is this character going to show up, and is that character going to show up? And it's like, oh, I don't know. I never really thought about including that character. So I do want a lot of characters who at some point, maybe make a cameo or something. Especially characters I get a lot of requests for. But then there's also the whole problem that the more characters I introduce, the more likely I am to get sued. So I also kind of try to keep a limit to not introduce too many characters.
Well, then you also don't have the like the Bleach problem where it has like 8,000 characters as well. So you know, yeah.
What happened to that show?
Oh man, what happened to Bleach? That's a whole other. Do you want to be here for like 3 hours? Because we can talk about like what happened to Bleach.
I was super into Bleach like in middle school, and then like seeing it now is like, what happened? Like,
no,
who are all these characters?
It is kind of funny, and don't take offense as I mean this in the best way possible, but it's like the transition from monstrous horror to kind of shonen battle duel. Mm-hmm. I thought like that kind of feels like what happened to Bleach, where it went from like monster of the week to swordsman dueling like early on, but like you do it like in this way that's like really, really interesting and allows
way
for, like,
better,
like more character creativity going on than just constant like doing more of the monsters. Like now that you've introduced Ballyhoo and you've introduced all these factions, like there's so much drama and betrayal and moving parts going on that's like super interesting.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think storytelling is really cool, and I love learning about like storytelling. So I always feel like I'm still learning new ways to like, tell stories. So a lot of it is me like just experimenting, trying to find what works, and I think that's good. I think a lot of creators kind of trap themselves into kind of doing the same thing over and over again.
Yeah.
When you got to keep it fresh, you can't keep it, stale.
Right. Shoot, I had a question. I just lost it. Oh no, come back. Well, okay. So, Ben, ask another question. I lost it.
Well, while she's thinking of that, I'll just ask a real quick one. Another quick one that I personally just like, I need to know. Who was the monster that Courage and Swipes fought in their first appearance? What character was that supposed to be? Because I thought it was an alien from Ben 10, but people are saying it's from Aliens and Monsters.
Yeah, that wasn't anybody. I'm gonna be honest. I just needed a random throwaway monster specifically. So because he was gonna die right away, so I was like, no one's gonna care.
Just make anything. Because I've also seen some people like in that. There's that shot you have later on where they're during Bugs and Scoob's duel where the other characters are trying to repel the monsters coming in, and I've seen people like, wait, who is that? Who is that? And it's like, I'm pretty sure they're just generic scribbled monsters to fit the scene.
That's one thing I see a lot is people just like trying to really look, like really read between the lines to a lot of things, and it's like, well, I didn't think that hard into it, honestly.
I think we've come to like expect that kind of thing from a lot of like weird subversive works like that. Like, pay attention to every single thing on this person's desk because it might be relevant later.
I mean, yeah, and I do think that is cool storytelling, which is what I mentioned. I kind of want it to get to that point, so that people get a better idea of the characters. Who they are, because right now they're just these random aliens fighting on a ship. So I want to dig a little deeper than that.
That actually reminds me. I did just remember my question. Thank God.
Oh, good.
Because talking about storytelling like snapped it back. So you said, is this like your first? I know you said you did comics and stuff in the past. That was just like anime fight kind of stuff. Is this your first kind of ongoing story comic, or have you done stuff in the past? So is this all just new to you, or have you done stuff like this in the past?
I have done a couple of stuff like this in the past. Not all of it I've like shared or posted online.
Yeah, of course.
It's growing up in school. I've always drawn. It's like been my number one hobby. So I've always made little comics, even if it's on like the corner of my journal or something at school.
Right.
But I've never, I guess, done something like where I've really sat down and like thought about it. 'Cause I guess I never really considered myself to be like a writer. I never thought I was a good writer. I was always just an artist.
Yeah.
So I think once I started making this comic and I really wanted it to be a story, is when I kind of got like a bigger interest in storytelling. And so
Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you. Is that why you've been kind of reading more like horror books and stuff lately? Is to try and like kind of...
Yeah, completely. I like learning what makes a story good. So I'll like sit down and watch video essays, or I'll read about things, because I think I'm still learning.
Yeah, because it is a different process to actually go from having ideas in your head to getting them down on paper and realizing like, oh, this has to have kind of a consistent tone throughout.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's probably hard to juggle the differing genres. You're trying to do a horror parody, so you have to have something that's scary but also funny, but not at the same time. You can't you do a good job of not dampening a lot of the horror by having it be a joke. Like the shot of Mick and the shot of faceless Shag and Barney when he transforms is like, oh, these are genuinely terrifying things. And then also you can have stuff like Scoob firing a giant blast out of a gun that he picked up.
Yeah, I mean, and that's definitely one of the questions I've had for myself, in writing the story lately, is like, what are the bigger themes here?
Yeah.
Because it's not just, the horror and the anime, but it's the whole idea of this, like, they're cartoon characters, and, we're watching them. They're getting this power from us watching them. And that, in turn, creates a whole planet, a whole society based around that idea. So I've been, trying to figure out what does that really all mean? How do I like tie that all together to like have like a bigger theme throughout the whole story?
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah. It's very like the kind of this idea of we give stuff meaning, I guess. Like, anything like stuff gets more powerful as like people give it meaning. And that actually is kind of interesting because it makes me think of a lot of this idea of having people do video essays and stuff about the stuff you make is that kind of is almost happening in a sense with the actual comic. Is it's being kind of given like a deeper meaning and like scope as more people become aware of it, and that's kind of an interesting parallel to kind of how things work within the story itself.
Yeah, and I've also thought a lot about how it affects me, like as a person, because I'm getting all this recognition as an artist. So in a way, it's like I'm getting a ballyhoo.
My ballyhoo is so strong.
I have to like ask, like, what does this mean?
Right.
Have so much visibility to like have all these people, like all these eyes on me, and what that means as an artist.
Yeah. Is your 9 to 5 not a create? Is it not an art job?
No, not at all. Okay. It's just a 9 to 5, really.
Yeah. Okay.
So this is really like the only outlet. And so stories are about the storyteller. I want this maybe a story about myself too.
Yeah. Yeah, and absolutely thinking of stuff like, what does that say about you as a person? And of course there is also like death of the author and as well. But it is, I do understand, I get you to say that is, because I mean that is kind of what like this whole podcast is really about, is just like really dig like overly deep into like themes and concepts and stuff like that in a story. And so part of why it's so interesting to actually have somebody on who is in the process of writing a story is to understand, like, yeah, you're kind of still figuring it out as you go as well. Yeah, for sure. And themes kind of just like emerge as you make it, right? Yeah, and I think, when you're writing a story and you're writing it about yourself, it's gonna relate to a lot of people because I think that's what media in general does. Art in general does is connect to people with like emotions through art, if that makes sense. Because the way one of the best ways I've seen art described is that art is a culmination of all of your life moments into one thing. You know, basically all of my life moments have led up to me making
Shag. So
Yeah.
it's kind of crazy to think about. Like, that's what I do now. But yeah, I think I definitely to tap themes of nostalgia. You know, there's a whole element, the idea of fear and what that fear means when you have like visibility.
Yeah.
'Cause it's a great thing to you know, have all these eyes on you.
Yeah. The horror of the desire to be loved and the horror of being known is the thing
Yeah,
I see
exactly.
on Twitter a lot. Yeah.
Those crazy things to people. I mean,
Right.
We've seen what happened with Atika recently, which was super
Yeah.
devastating. And obviously, you know, he had a lot of issues that stemmed from his life as a content creator.
The pressure of being that visible.
Exactly.
Yeah. Having eyes on you all the time and kind of like what that does to people and to media. That is an interesting thing to kind of bring up too, is that pretty idea that comes up in the actual, not necessarily explicitly said in the comic, but that is kind of an underlying idea of like the more eyes on you, the more it's kind of like imbued with like meaning and power and stuff like that.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why I introduced the whole idea of like people that have all this, you know, value energy. It comes with some, you know, side effects. You know, obviously they're hearing all these voices of all these people. So that's kind of supposed to represent the idea of them like, you know, literally hearing all the people that see them.
Even if it's all this positive attention, there's still like a tremendous amount of pressure.
Exactly.
On that as someone who's like in charge of that feedback, you know. Yeah, I remember like specifically like the comic where Bugs turns to us, the audience, and asks us to pick between Kermit and Yogi. And it's like that's kind of the first time you're like, oh, this is like it made me like better understand and more directly connect with that concept of like having all that attention on you and the negative effects of that.
Exactly. Yeah.
And then
definitely something I want to like flesh out a bit more.
Yeah.
And then but then on the opposite side of that, I think what's really interesting is with this comic is we've joked a lot even in this interview where it's like, oh, it's these comic book or cartoon characters doing all these weird fight things, but like you've taken these characters that are some of them are kind of treated like memes, like you said, like the Kermit images of the Kermit puppet doing weird things, or like the meme of Shaggy using 1% of his power kind of thing.
Right.
But you've taken these characters and taken them and made them like so much more like empathetic and like relatable, so that you've created like such a genuine response from a lot of people of like, oh, we really care about like these characters' safety and their well-being. It was funny because I saw your image, your celebratory image of 100,000 subscribers, and I'm like, I think that's the first time Shag's genuinely smiled the whole comic.
Yeah, I thought about that like literally as I was drawing it. I was like, wow, Shag's never smiled. That's really depressing.
No, that's really sad.
Like he's had a few smirks and a few grins, but like, yeah, that's the first time he's been like genuinely happy. Oh no.
Oh man.
Yeah.
Do you ever just feel bad, like subjecting all these characters from your childhood to this stuff?
Yeah, definitely, because I've had people react and be like, no, why would you kill that character? We love that character. And I'm like, I'm sorry.
The story demands it.
Yeah. There's got to like, yeah, that's the other thing I want. Like another thing I'm thinking about, like I couldn't do like I could not bring myself to make Mickey Mouse into this cold-blooded killer, like who implodes Patrick Star from SpongeBob. I'm like, I think that's great storytelling, but I'm like, oh, I couldn't do that. I couldn't bring myself to make these characters do that.
Should have introduced you as the bravest man on the internet.
Hope you weren't too attached to Yosemite Sam.
It's fine. Oh my god.
Well, I mean, yeah, I mean, a lot of it is about taking risks, and it's back to that whole idea of like using copyrighted characters. Like that's a huge risk.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I mean, but sometimes it's what you got to do to really get out there.
I mean, it makes it more impactful. It is kind of a whole like if you're unless you're like a 13-year-old on Tumblr who just kind of like stumbled on this and you know, get off Tumblr if you are. No, I'm kidding. But like it is interesting because if you're reading this and you have any kind of like attachment to it, part of it comes from the fact that like most of us, I'm assuming you as well, watched back when Cartoon Network was like 95% old Looney Tunes reruns.
Yeah.
A lot of us have got that. That's like we all have that weird shared cultural connection. If you're anywhere from I don't know, I want to say like 25 to 35, you experience that in some way.
Yeah, I'm actually turning 26 on Monday.
Oh, happy birthday!
Happy birthday!
Thanks.
What great timing!
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, so you understand. I feel like we all have that weird shared experience of being like a kid and watching cartoons from the 40s in the 90s.
Yeah.
And that was like a huge part of like old Cartoon Network programming. So that's why these characters kind of work as well, is because like the general audience is all drawing from the same background, which again is neat because it kind of reflects like in the story itself with like the concepts that you're using.
Yeah, and I mean, nostalgia is like a huge thing, especially now. I feel like we live in an era of nostalgia. So that's also like one theme and like one thing I want to talk about because we see a lot of nostalgia in like our media today. So I kind of want to talk about what does that really mean? Why are we so nostalgic for these things, and how can I like subvert expectations and like make you expect new things from that nostalgia.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Because a lot of these nostalgia based movies. I don't know. I know you said you like video essays, so I'm going to kind of throw one at you. Movies with Mikey. If you've heard of him.
No, I haven't.
He's really good, and he has a video about Blade Runner 2049, and about how it separates itself from other nostalgia based like reboots and sequels and soft reboots and blah 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 by actually like having something to say versus other nostalgia based properties that are just like, hey, remember that? Remember Tron?
Yeah.
No,
yeah, I agree 100%. I remember when I saw Blade Runner 2049, one of the things I thought of, that felt really different from Blade Runner. It didn't really feel like a Blade Runner movie, but it felt like something in the Blade Runner universe, I guess.
Yeah.
Which I think was really cool. But yeah, and we're seeing it a lot more now with stuff like Into the Spider-Verse does that a lot too, which is this whole idea of like passing things on to like a new generation. That's a theme I feel like I see a lot in media. So I think that's really interesting in terms of like passing on nostalgia, I guess.
Yeah.
But giving it a different meaning.
Oh, cool.
Yeah,
that's just cool. It's just because that's the thing that's been on a lot of people's minds lately, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's just a really good way of thinking about the whole concept of the comic, basically, and just like here like you're basically making a comic not about these characters but about like our attachment to them, our nostalgia for them, and their legacy almost.
Yeah, exactly. And then I have to think about what if someone didn't grow up with these characters? What do these characters mean then? So yeah. A lot of space to work with there.
I think that's what you do a good job of that, of just like not only combining these classic Hanna-Barbera or Warner Brothers characters, but also like Samurai Jack just showed up. The Ninja Turtles showed up. Swiper is a pretty prominent character, and they're all relatively recent characters. So you get like everyone's like nostalgia, no matter what, in there.
I like, yeah, it's like what you mentioned before. Like, obviously, I didn't grow up at the time Scooby-Doo came out, but because of like reruns and stuff, I got exposed. So yeah, I think so.
Yeah, it is kind of interesting too, because in a way, like those old cartoon characters they kind of like embody nostalgia in a way, like because of the time period they come from. When you tell somebody like a nostalgia, like the visual concept of nostalgia, a lot of people's minds go to like the 40s, 50s, and 60s. So it is kind of like using those characters in specific, because like though they are kind of they are nostalgia itself, which is like a whole other can of worms. You know, we could literally spend all night just talking about like the concept of weaponized nostalgia and using it for good and for bad. And yeah, it's really interesting. It's not like a way I even kind of thought about the comic until now. It's really, it's very interesting.
That's
think about.
That's the way I see these characters to be like a vessel of like with nostalgia. They're a vessel that I can tell other stories with.
That's interesting. Like for a few examples, it's like going back to the initial idea of you taking these well-established iconic characters that are part of our childhood, and then killing them or making them turn evil. And it's like that fits in the comic really well, because like to us it's the death of Yosemite Sam or Barney Rubble, these characters we grew up with, but also within the context of the comic, they're part of the broadcasts that aired. So it's not just us losing that character. We also get the fact that within the context of the comic, that beloved character is dead too.
Yeah, like he looks and sounds like Yosemite, but really he's just some military asshole that like goes on TV.
And it's interesting. Like I remember like talking about nostalgia and the idea of like these old references that we grew up with that kind of embody these characters. Like for instance, Bugs as a carrot, the iconic symbol or image of Bugs with a carrot was a reference to another movie that we never saw, so we just have this one association. And then you take Bugs and you give him a banana, and then it's like, oh, something's wrong here. Something's very, very off here.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because when I was drawing that panel, I was like, oh, it's Bugs. He's got to have a carrot, right? But then it's like, how do I get across the idea that this is Bugs, but maybe it's not the Bugs you recognize? And so it was just kind of just like a little thing I could throw in there to kind of make it off, to make it feel like, something's wrong with this isn't Bugs.
Right.
That's great. I mean, that's like such effective use of our nostalgia, of our expectations, and weaponizing our childhood, basically.
Yeah, that's a funny way of putting it. Yeah, I'm just weaponizing his childhood.
I mean, but and then that's again that kind of ties back to the idea of like ballyhoos too, of weaponizing.
Yeah, literally.
People's perceptions of a character, like literally weaponized. Yeah.
And speaking of those, I want to say, like, I think you do a really good job of not being obvious about everyone's ballyhoo. It would be easy to give Popeye like a strength ballyhoo, like one that makes him super strong, because that's what we know him as. But instead, you give him this ability that requires them to be really creative with their powers.
Yeah, that's definitely something I thought about, because when I want to make it interesting, it's a lot more fun to make a fight between two interesting powers rather than two, I guess, interesting characters. Well, obviously the kids are important, because the stakes are important in a fight.
Mhm.
But I think it's more fun to do something a little different rather than just like, oh, this person can fly, oh, this person has strength, this person is fast. That's kind of boring. I want to do something a little different.
Yeah, those stories have been told like 1,000 times before. It's way more interesting to have like really out there powers and see how it happens when you kind of smash those two together.
Yeah.
Are there any ideas you just kind of like threw to the wayside? Like, are there scrapped ballyhoos that you're just like, no, that's way too out there, or like, no, I have no idea how I would even represent that on the page? Are there like cool scrapped ballyhoos that you got rid of just because you were just like, it wouldn't work?
Well, if I scrapped them, they probably weren't that cool, which is probably
okay.
Like I thought of some like fast forward, for example, like that. It's like it's too easy if I make it just super speed, right?
Yeah.
Right.
So that's when I kind of had to throw to the side and be like, maybe I'll come back to this later with a more interesting way of doing that.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, I have a huge list of ballyhoos I haven't used yet.
Oh man,
I was about to ask. I was about to ask, like, so do you come up with because they're all based on TV functions, which I want to say I think that's a really cool. I think that's like one of the coolest things ever. But do you come up with the name first and then assign a power to it, or do you like, Yogi should have the ability to reflect any attack back? What can I call that?
No, I definitely base them on the name of the power, I think. But yeah, I mean, I originally started it off as just the buttons on a remote control. But then I ran out of ideas in like 2 seconds with that. So then I was like, okay, well, why don't I make it a bit more broad and make it just TV things in general? And then I literally started like Googling, going on Wikipedia, finding all these like terminologies for like ideas in like film or TV. And I'm like, okay, there's a lot here to work with. And so a lot of them just like really came naturally. Like Frame by Frame was one that was like I don't know. It was really, I felt really obvious to me.
I think it's also visually one of the coolest powers you've drawn. That panel of Pop walking like serpentine, and just all of those shots of him is just visually amazing.
Yeah, that one was really fun to draw. Also very difficult because I had to draw Pop like 20 times.
You start seeing Popeye in your sleep.
Yeah.
Do you dream about this, by the way?
I wouldn't say so.
Okay.
No.
Because I have dreams about my job. I'm always just like, I
mean, maybe.
Dream about this?
Maybe once like I start doing this full time, it's gonna like consume my dreams. But yeah, one of the reasons that when I was drawing that Pop fight, I was originally gonna draw him out like every single time he would use Frame by Frame. But then I was like, okay, maybe it'll be easier if I made him kind of fade out as he goes backwards. So that was a lot less taxing on me.
It's like why Super Saiyans have gold hair. It's just because Toriyama did with the color in the hair.
That's funny that you mentioned that, because Scoob and Shag is entirely in black and white. And at first, I did that because it obviously is just easier than like coloring in every single panel. But then it was like, I started thinking about it and I was like, what if color doesn't really exist in this world? What if it is in black and white? Which is why that scene with I think Mickey was really fun to do, because it's so impactful to see everyone, look at him and be like, what's wrong with his eyes? What is that?
Right, yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. Really good.
Yeah, so there's a lot I want to like play around with the idea of color also in this world. So
are you ever like considering the idea of some kind of print run, or like, I don't know if it would even work as a print run, but have you juggled like that idea before?
Yeah, it's something I've wanted to do like since I started like really doing the story. And people have been asking for it, so it's something I really want to do. The problem with it is it's just so difficult to like reformat it.
Yeah.
Print basically.
This is very tall. Yeah.
Yeah. Webtoon specifically, it's formatted so that you read everything vertically, but if you want to transfer pages, everything is left in. So it's like, okay, I have to re-angle the so that it's still all legible.
Yeah.
So it's something I wanted to do for a while, but it's gonna take a lot of like really sitting down and like playing it out.
Patreon incentive.
Yeah.
Like, hey, if I can do this my full-time job, I can maybe think like a limited run physical copy of Scoob and Shag.
Yeah.
I mean, it would be cool if you could get them printed like manga volume style, like even back, like printed in reverse.
Just flip all the panels.
Yeah. Scoob and Shag Volume 1.
Oh, man.
Put that in the manga section at Barnes and Noble instead of the like comic section.
Yeah, that'd be funny. And that's a whole other demon. If I want to like sell this in bookstores, like people are gonna look at this and be like, "Wait, this is Scoob and Shag. Can you legally sell this?"
Yeah.
Maybe.
I won't tell if you don't.
Yeah.
Just hope the Disney cops don't come and find us.
Exactly.
Underground like speakeasy Scoob and Shag distribution.
Just knocking on a door somewhere and be like, what's the password? It's ballyhoo. Okay, come on in.
It's like remember those old Cartoon Network commercials where it's like they were selling cartoons out of a trunk.
Oh my god, yes.
Oh yeah.
So what I guess like what was your favorite cartoon growing up? Like out of everything, like what was the one that like hit you the most?
That's really hard to say. I think I watched probably Cartoon Network more than I did like Nickelodeon or like Disney Channel. But saying that, SpongeBob was huge for me. I think most people in our generation.
Oh my god, yeah.
Because it's like the most quotable cartoon of like all time.
Yeah, I was literally saying SpongeBob quotes to somebody yesterday, and I have like one coworker who's like, "I don't get SpongeBob quotes." I'm like, "What?" She's my age.
One of my closest friends didn't grow up with SpongeBob, and so like me and the rest of my quote something from it, and we'll look at him and be like, "What? Get it? Why don't you get it?"
Why are you screaming future?
Yeah.
I've heard someone describe it that's like we are to SpongeBob as to what like our parents were to the Simpsons, where it's just like, you can say a Simpsons line and like a bunch of 30-40-year-olds will just start quoting it, and then us 20 to 30-year-olds are like, oh yeah, just say a SpongeBob quote and we'll just go all day.
Yeah, it's crazy because like someone will just say something like in a regular like conversation that kind of sounds like maybe uses a word or two from like a certain quote from SpongeBob, and it just like pops into my head like future.
All these episodes we have memorized just because we've watched them so many times.
Are you feeling it now, Mr. Krabs? That's what I say a lot. So,
one I really love using, and it's such an obscure one too. But whenever like goes down a line saying like, "Yeah, me too," like I'll always jump in and go, "And me makes 10." It was like a quote from Mermaid Man from SpongeBob. Like, that's how people get it.
Oh man. Well, Ben, do you have any more questions before we've been going? I think we've been going for about an hour and 10, hour and 15. I don't want to keep you too much longer.
Yeah, I actually do have one more, and it's kind of a good closing one.
Yeah.
Come on, man. Can you give us like any details about what's coming up? What can we expect? What can we look forward to? Exclusive here on the Gorge Podcast.
I feel like I've given a lot more than I was expecting to give, honestly.
We got him with the theme discussion.
I guess the only thing I can really mention is well, like I said before, I feel like this arc of Scoob and Shag is kind of coming to an end.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm gonna move on to something a little different.
Mm-hmm.
And it has to do with what I was mentioning before, which is I want to kind of go back to the roots of this and explore more of the horror side of the story. So that's definitely something I want to do, is maybe tell like shorter kind of horror stories that all kind of still connect to this like big overarching plot.
Ooh.
So yeah. Also,
that's your exclusive scoop.
Yeah. I mean, as far as like lore, I can't really give anything away without spoiling anything.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm planning on putting up an official like store pretty soon.
Oh, exciting!
Awesome.
Yes, there's gonna be like a bunch of cool. I have a lot of like leftover stuff from like conventions I was going to recently, so I have like enamel pins and prints. I want to do T-shirts as well.
I think T-shirts will sell really well if you could, especially because you have built-in all the emblems all the characters wear. You have that built in right there.
Yeah, that's something I love to make the Letterman jacket.
I would
Shag and Kermit and all of them wear.
Let me know as soon as those was on sale. I will buy the first one. I want those
limited edition.
As soon as I saw Shag with that jacket, I'm like, I need that. I need to own that and wear that.
That's something I for the longest time I've wanted to get made, but then it's like it's so like specific, the details of it. And I was like, this is gonna cost a lot of money. Mm-hmm. So maybe in the future sometime.
Right. Well then, before we go, is there anything you want to plug, like convention appearances? Obviously, plug your Patreon again, your Twitter, anything like that.
Yeah, my Patreon is patreon.com/dingothedog. My Twitter is @_Scoob and Shag. I don't really have any cons coming up right now. Okay. I might have one coming up later this year, but I'm still waiting to hear back on that one.
Awesome.
But yeah, just follow me on Twitter or Instagram or Tumblr. All those links are there. So.
Well, thank you so much for coming and talk to us. You did like a proper gorge, man. You were with us for like an hour and 15, an hour and 20 minutes. You're like one of us.
Thanks for having me, because I mean I listen to podcasts all the time, so it's like I've always wanted to kind of be on one. So like I said, first of many, hopefully.
Yeah, hopefully. Absolutely, God willing.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Thanks for coming. I'll do our shout out stuff. Thanks to Broke Free for background music. You can follow me and Sara on Twitter. I'm at The Gorge Podcast. Sarah's at radioinactivity. You can email us at thegorgepodcast@gmail.com. Sara can tell us about her other podcast right now.
Hey, Dingo, you don't know this, but I'm in another podcast, Big Gay Nerds, where me and a bunch of cool queer friends get together and we play tabletop games. You can find us at biggaynerds@soundcloud.com, and you can find the links to the rest of our social media from there. I say the same thing every episode. I hear it. I do hear that in my sleep sometimes.
All right. So normally we end this by telling something to go fuck itself, but I think there's not much in this comic that I want.
Unless you have something you want to say.
Is there anything that you're just like, oh man, I hated drawing that, or I hated this part of it, or I hate this character?
That's a tough one. I guess my job go fuck itself.
Yeah,
it's keeping us from getting regular.
Yeah, if you guys really love Scoob and Shag, supporting it, so I'll quit my job. And
yeah, there you go.
Work back forever.
Thank you again so much. This was awesome.
It was great. Thank you, and good night, everyone.
Good night, everyone.
Good night, guys.